Hi, Hotties. Welcome back to the Real House Guest of North Hollywood. Today's guest was a breath of fresh air this season on Summer House. While some of the cast were caught up in late-night antics and drama, he brought vulnerability, humor, and just a sense of groundedness we don't often see in the Hamptons. From sharing his story as an undocumented immigrant to opening up about identity and being the center of the iconic tailgate, I would love to welcome the quietly curious but subtly iconic Imrul.
Thanks for having me.
How are you? How are you feeling? There's a lot going on with the season just ended.
Yeah, a lot is going on. I've been through a whirlwind the last few months, personal stuff and then the show. And, I'm just trying to navigate through everything. But I if nothing else, I think what I have is a sense of adversity through pressure. I've been taught that from my parents, and I'm carrying that forward. And take everything with a grain of salt, and try to be lighthearted, but also be honest about what happened. And I've been on a little circuit recently and share it to anybody who about it. And that's been really good. It's been really cathartic for me to get it out there. I'm usually not someone who loves to share too much unless people ask me questions, then I'll book. And that's what I kind of want to do in this.
Yeah, I mean, you're in such a vulnerable place right now in your life, and being on a show like Summer House, which is pretty big, spotlight, that's very interesting to go through that with so much light on you,
Yeah.
I do want to ask you a little bit, what was your relationship like with reality TV, Bravo, before, appearing on Summer House? Were you a fan? Had you never seen the show?
Yeah. I'll be honest. Maybe I should say I was a fan. I watched a little bit. I didn't watch any of it, honestly. I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't know if it's about Summer House. I did a little bit, known Kyle for a little bit, but I've only known him for, not too much longer before I actually came on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really got into reality television before this, but now I do watch a bit more because I was a part of it, and it is it's interesting, especially if you get into the characters. I come from watching sports and knowing all the different little side stories that are so irrelevant to most people, but I get so into it, and it's there's he used to play for this team and I plays for this team, and that's why it's a whole thing. And you got all this kind of nonsense for most people. I got into it, and that's kind of how it is with, I think, reality television. Once you know the players and you know the people, and you're just so invested, it's sport, and it's it's super fascinating. So I think you just need a little bit of intro into it, and then when you get into it, it's a fun time.
Yeah, there's, all these places to go. And I'm watching Love Island right now, and all my friends, the whole country is. And even my friends who don't watch reality shows are watching it. Yeah. And you're right. It is that sports mentality of oh, this person's coupled up with this person.
Well, I think we're at a time where it seems like reality television is crossing over to all of media. It seems like it's a time the people on our show are doing amazing. Right? They're doing a ton of commercials, Wes and Jesse and Lindsay and a bunch of them. So there's that crossover that's happening. And like you said about Love Island, everyone kind of knows about it now, right? Not just people who watch.
Yeah.
We've been watching reality television. So I think it's made that pivot point where it's now it's everywhere.
So what was the casting process like for Summer House? How did it kind of jump into your lap?
Yeah, I, for whatever reason, I have a tiny social media following, but I've gotten a bunch of different DMs for different reality television shows, Big Brother and some other thing, and then F-Boy Island, which, in hindsight, maybe I should have just done that. I don't know if you know what that show is.
I've heard.
Yeah,
Kind of insane.
it's a crazy concept. I don't think it's around anymore, but they reached out. And I'm like, that's not something I want to do. And then my friend had mentioned, you know, I was talking to her about it. She's like, you know what show would be good? It would be really good for you. It's like this show called Summer House. And this was like, you know, even before any of this happened, like 6 months before the casting process. And she, you know, telling me about this. I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. And I kind of knew about it, like I said, through Kyle and whatever. And I think through that, the referral happened and then the DM happened and it all kind of happened at the same time. And they reached out, we talked a little bit and they told me the concept or like, you don't film all the time and it's only in the weekends. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And yeah, we had, you know, 5 or 6 conversations. And because I wasn't sold on the whole thing just yet because I have a good thing going here, you know, like, do I really want to shake things up? And I mentioned this on another show, another podcast where I also had like, I had somebody in my life who I had told 2 years prior that I kind of want to be on TV, but I don't want to do any work to get on it. Like zero, because you're in New York, you can, you know, if you want to be on TV and really try, you can be an actor, do whatever, you know. I mean, I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just kind of wanted to fall in my lap. And then it did. And then I was still kind of waffling about it. And then she came back into my life while this casting process was happening. She's like, what are you doing? You manifested this and this is happening. You got to jump on it. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I got to do it. And, you know, they said they wanted me on the show. I'm like, yeah, I think I want to be on the show. And that was it. But
wow.
With that being said, they did say it was a weird season where they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Kyle had mentioned too, like they weren't really casting for guys last season. You know, there's always a casting process that happens.
Yeah.
They had a strong season. Obviously, season 8 was fantastic, right? And those 2 guys crushed it. So they weren't quite looking for. I mean, crushed it like as far as like, you know, being popular and whatever, you know, good for reality television. So they weren't quite looking for a guy. And I think I just had an interesting enough story. And they're like, well, let's shake things up and see what happens, I suppose. And they're telling me like, you know, we're kind of thinking we want to have you on, but maybe, you know, we're going to figure out what to do with you. We're not sure if you're going to be on every week, half the summer. It turned out to be half the summer, but, you know, it was kind of a work in progress and they're just trying to finagle and figure out what to do. And obviously, you kind of see that with the season kind of going on. They had no idea what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. And, you know.
So was Kyle the only one you knew going in?
Yeah. Kyle and just like, you know, met him a few times.
Yeah. Acquaintances.
Acquaintances. I didn't, but we're like friends, you know.
You're like one reality star that has like a real job too.
Yeah. And that was, you know, that kind of that's kind of a big part of it too. Like I wasn't trying to make this a career. You know, I had no clue. I'm like, cool, it sounds fun. You're going to pay me to go to the fucking Hamptons? Why not? And, you know, I'm like, all right, if it becomes something, great. If not, I was kind of worried that it would actually hurt my career a little bit. Not so much that I would lose partnerships, but it was taking me away from, you know, a busy season. Last summer was kind of not as busy as it usually is for me. Like this summer, I'm about to launch a building right now next week in Greenpoint. That's how I was staging, doing all this stuff. And I couldn't even if they didn't want me back. I didn't want to go back, you know. And that thing that I wrote online, by the way, my post, I was kind of waffling. Should I write something? I think I'm like people know that it's not happening. You know, you don't get cut out and then like go back on. And it seemed obvious. And I was hanging out with Carl, and he's like, "Dude, I thought you were coming back. I didn't know." You know, I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." You know, it's like you never know. It's hard. You know, it's hard to cast for guys too. So I think he thought I was coming back. I'm like, do I say something? He's like, I think you should. And that kind of pushed me to like put something out there, you know, for the fans, for people who have supported me and you know, have some closure around that, I suppose. But every time I make a post, I make an error. There's always a typo. Or just like my you know, like I write something really nicely and then maybe I do something and there's always an error. The post I wrote about my dad, you know, I said he, instead of passed away, he passed out, you know? Yeah. Like that was like, I mean, I think people
got it. But you're grieving too.
Yeah. No, for sure. But that's just one example. There's other times I'm not grieving. I make typos like that all the time. So I took whatever I wrote, I put on ChatGPT, like, you know, spell check this and, you know, refine this a bit. Right. And they did. And it was like, oh, this is much better. And I didn't proofread it as what I should have. Don't trust computers. And what I've written first was that I'm not coming back. kind of leave it ambiguous because it was a
Mm-hmm.
decision that way. I didn't want to go back and they wanted back. And then it corrected to, I've chosen not to come back, which, you know,
Yeah.
is whatever.
Indicate something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's not a big deal. It is what it is, you know,
no.
and like, you know, it's like people are definitely rolling their eyes. Like they didn't like some people definitely thought that like, and I'm making that up, you know, the same thing with like whatever with Lexi. I'm sure some people thought the same thing about that.
Yeah.
When she wrote that. So yeah. Yeah.
So you only kind of knew Kyle, but like now that the show's done, you know, you're not coming back. Like, is there anyone on the show you feel like, oh, we're kind of friends now? Like, who would you like hang out with still?
Yeah. You know, like I'm supposed to, you know, me and the guys text every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle's super busy, so he's not in the Hamptons. He's out doing some DK thing. You know, he's really
Mm-hmm.
pushing this right now. I think that might be his like exit plan, which, you know, sounds like a fun exit plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Carl and I have gotten close over the last few months. Like I said, my new building is in Greenpoint. It's like 2 blocks away from his bar. So we've been talking about collabing. We've hung out. We just went to the Palm Tree Festival. That was a good time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, him and I have gotten close and have hung out a bunch recently. And, you know, like Jesse and I were talking about like going to the gym and hanging out too. You know, despite all the things that happen during the season, things I might say and things he might say or whoever else, there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood that happens with these things. You know, you're being vulnerable, you're putting yourself out there, and there's only a select few people who are doing that. So it's just a bond that you have with people.
Yeah.
That, you know, doesn't go away. You know, you might not want to hang out, but there's a respect level like that is, I think that's there. That's like, it's underlying, but it's there. And, you know, I think we all have that for each other.
That's wonderful. Is there anything about filming Summer House you think people would be surprised to know? I mean, you have cameras on you 24/7. Like, what's
Yeah.
that like? Do you feel like you're on the Truman Show? Like,
I mean, I wish I had more like, I wish I thought about it more. You know, I think I'm just like, what's happening? I'm like, that's fine. It's not, you know, like I didn't really think about it. If I thought about it, I probably would have done things slightly differently. I'm like, whatever. Let me just treat this like it's normal. You know, yeah, you do have cameras there, but that wasn't. I don't think I was changing my behavior too much. I think the hardest thing is they're not forced conversations, but they kind of put you in. It's like, hey, everyone, this Sunday morning ones, and I talked about this. Those are difficult as fuck to do because, you know, if you're out and partying or whatever, just whatever, you know, it doesn't even have to be that. But then having to like sit around at 11 o'clock and on a Sunday and just have these conversations, recapping, you know, after a long weekend, it's very difficult to do.
well,
And
I'm sure you want to sleep in too.
yeah, you want to sleep in. Yeah, you want to get some Uber Eats and just not think about things, you know. And then at that point, we'll also want to just leave and go drive back, you know, and like be in our own beds and hang and just, you know, relax. And you know, you kind of feel the energy a little bit. I didn't feel like I had good Sundays. You know, they were just like, I think that's the one thing I regret a bit. You know, you can't change things, but like, I wish I was a bit more, you know, articulate in the way I've expressed myself around those like Sunday afternoon, early morning, whatever, late morning conversations around the pool. Because they're fine, but you know, like I feel like, you know, I'm wittier or this or that. You know, the things you always kind of just like second guess yourself about. That was happening on camera when you're, you know, hungover or just not your most coherent. And that's like the toughest part about it all. You know, you get used to it and you get better at it as the season went. I'm like, okay, I got to relax a little bit. And then like, I would like one of my things, like I'm a big routine guy. Like I'll go do a party and have fun. That's kind of my MO, but I'll wake up and make sure I hit the sauna and get a workout in. You know, I would do that all the time in New York and it just resets my whole rhythm. And I wasn't doing that at all over there. And in the last few weekends, I found a gym and I started doing that. And it just felt more like myself, you know?
Yeah. And then, so if you're able to feel like yourself, I'm sure you're able to be more authentic in those conversations, I assume.
Yeah. And yeah. And like, yeah, make the connections and like piece things together and things like that. And yeah.
Were there any like moments that were just like on Paige and Hannah's podcast, they always talk about the best moments of the summer are always cut out because they're always stupid or silly. Were there any just like truly fun moments? You're like, I know it didn't fit into the drama, but it was just fun.
Yeah, it's a party house. We played a bunch of chesties and we had, like we made food together and things like that. And that you don't see any of that stuff, right? Because that's
Yeah.
just like, and there was my first rodeo and my first time around the parties, and I had a great time at those parties. They were extravagant parties, and we go all out, and the producers had pulled me over a few times and say, "Listen, we're not getting anything out of you. You're just out there partying." I'm like, I thought that was a point. But then once I was like, I had brought friends, I was interacting with like some guests, and it was fine. But I guess not great, because those parties is when you have like you get everyone gets a little looser, and you want to have those conversations with your castmates and kind of put the drama out there a little bit more. And I wasn't doing that.
Well, it's like, the season when Jesse and Lexi were done, and then they had that fight in the kitchen. That's what they want. And yeah, it wasn't your vibe. So I
More
did feel
for like Kyle and Craig, like having that conversation. That was, we didn't see that, but Craig was like, Craig was like, just because the producers want to do it doesn't mean we should do it, because like they were really pushing to have. I mean, it was going to happen anyway, but they really wanted to get it there while he was there that weekend, And Craig said, "I'm just here to have fun." And Kyle's like, I want to, because he actually does want to hash it out, but it felt more forced, and Craig was pushing back on that, that kind of stuff. I don't think that was shown. So it's like,
not really. What was your impression of Craig? Like, what did you think of him?
I mean, I talked to him for a few minutes. He said I was like Chris from a few seasons before. He's like, "Oh, you're Chris, but you're a cooler version of Chris."
The other brown guy.
Yeah, I'm like, cool, I'll take that, I guess. Yeah. Well, yeah, we talked about raving and snowboarding. So like whatever, like shared interest in that. I didn't get any depth from that, obviously it was fine. He seemed fun.
I don't really want to talk about Toegate that much, just because I felt like it pulled too much. Yeah. So you have nothing else to clarify. I feel like you've talked about it on other podcasts this week, and it was kind of the least interesting thing, I think, that they focused on, because there were so many other parts of you. Like, I thought you opening up about being undocumented felt very vulnerable and like raw. Yeah. What did it like feel like in real time?
Yeah, it's that Sunday. If I take it back, if I could just one take back, it would be that. It'd be that conversation, because it wasn't. And I mentioned this. It wasn't coherent. It's the point that we had to clarify a bit, I think, and the show did a good job in clarifying what I'd said, because the way the question was presented was, Kyle's like, "Well, this is a good time for you to talk about your relationship, because I had just brought back girls back to back, which hasn't been done since like Carl, like season 1 and 2 or whatever." And I think that's what Carl like. Carl like saw a lot of himself in me. And I trying to just launch into being undocumented, which isn't a cohesive answer. That's like what I wanted to say was like, yeah, you know what? I had 2 long relationships, and I was also really burdened and encumbered by not having the sense of freedom from being who I am, from being undocumented. And like, I wanted that to be my launch story into that. Instead, it wasn't like, like it still came out. And I think I'm super happy to be able to share that from someone who has hidden that for the vast majority of his life, because he didn't want anyone, because I didn't want, like, I don't know, I'm talking about myself that way, but because I didn't want anyone to feel bad for me, But then as I've come away from it, I realized that, it's a strength of mine, right? It's a strength of mine to have these differences. I think sometimes you need a bit of space and to have some kind of grounding, so you can use, those things that seem like such weaknesses as strengths. And I knew I wanted to talk about it. I didn't know exactly how it was going to come out, and it came out that way. Whatever. But I was glad to share. I was glad to share. And they asked a few questions, and that was kind of it. People were like, "Okay, well, we don't know what else to talk about." I think it's just so hard for them to wrap their heads around something that's so foreign, right? And everyone's so involved in everything else. So it's like, yeah, I think that was the end of it all. Like, no one really, kind of.
Yeah. And I wanted to see more. Like, my partner who produces this podcast with me, he's an immigrant as well. And he was like, he doesn't really watch Bravo, and his eyes just came up. And I think he he's from Ethiopia, but I think he like felt representation, in that moment, quite literally. And you're going onto the show kind of representing multiple marginalized identities. Was there pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be, I wanted to do it for a lot of people, but I also wanted to do it for myself, because I think, because we're marginalized, and I've taken like this baseline racism, and subtle, not even subtle, but just like, yeah, just these overt like little jabs and comments over the course of my life. I've kind of treated them as just a course of life, and this whole idea of not being accepted, even though I never kind of fully went into it, like I never
Mm-hmm.
felt rejected. I think because I would just kind of, every time that would happen, I just kind of say, okay, whatever, that's whatever. I have other things going for me. I
Mm-hmm.
was just talking about this story recently where, I was trying to, I had no money, as a 17, 18-year-old, and I couldn't work because I was undocumented. And all my buddies they were working at this Italian restaurant in Bay Ridge, and they made great money. I'm like, give me a job there. And I talked to the manager who kind of knew me, and he's like, well, no. And I talked about this in another show, I think. He was like, no, because you're too brown, right to my face.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm like, okay, I guess so. I didn't even think about it. I'm like, okay, that's just the way life is. You just take it in the chin and just move on.
Yeah.
And it's those moments. That's just one story, and there's a bunch of stories like that, and a bunch of people who feel this way. So going to the Hamptons, even though I'm not quite a Hamptons guy, or I'm definitely not a Hamptons guy. In the sense that I've never been to the Hamptons before, is this sense of just being accepted by people who've rejected you, and a whole institution of has rejected you for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it felt like, and I knew a lot of people felt that same ways. And obviously we don't see people like me definitely on Summer House or the Hamptons that much. So it was cool to put that out there. It really, really felt good. And again, as someone who's also kind of, I ran away from my culture for the longest time, because, you just want to feel accepted, like, and, like football and be American and do all these things. And then it takes some time to realize who you are and how your differences, like I mentioned before, make you who you are and make you much stronger, give you perspective. Yeah. And, I just wanted to, come out and be all those things, and not just like,
Yeah.
I'm just this one person who now I have all these qualities that are accepted by the society, that this failed, group of elitist, almost in a way, right? No, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can do those things. I've come there, I consider those tables, but I'm also this other person too,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, that's what life's about, right? It's like understanding that you're multiple people, that you are a
Mm-hmm.
person who belongs there, but you're also a person who, like, who hates that part, who hates part of that. But both things can exist.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just get into who you are for both to be valid representations of you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
taken me a long time to get to that, where I can be this person and this person, this person. It's like, well, who's a real you? I'm like, well, three of them, or four or
Yeah.
five. They're all together, working together, and pushing and pulling. And I think that's what life's more about, like knowing when to push and know when to pull at each of these personalities. So yeah.
I definitely relate to that a lot. I feel like whenever we grow up and kind of lean into the thing that we don't want to be, we're like, actually, I love this part about
Yeah.
myself.
Sure. Yeah. It's
Um,
like, yeah, I think a lot of people have that thing. It's like, oh, I want this person to not be here. It's like, no, you need that person to be there, just because so
uh-huh.
other parts of you can exist, maybe sometime we had to find a better balance. And I think that's what we need to, or at least I need to work
Mm-hmm.
on. So, just like,
Mm-hmm.
but I know I need all of them to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing is, I know you said you did film like a WhatsApp call with your mom and it was
Yeah.
cut. And I just feel like the show didn't almost want to show all these parts of you. You were
Yeah.
supposed to be this dude that was just hooking up with a lot of girls. And I feel like the moment where you talked about being undocumented, even though you said it felt rocky, to me, it felt very human
Yeah.
to see you in these multifaceted ways. Were there any other moments like that you feel like would have shown more of who you are that were cut?
I mean, yeah, just like a bunch of family stuff, like even the thing
Mm-hmm.
with me with, my uncle. I spoke to my
Mm-hmm.
uncle about it. He was here. He's the grandfather of, there's like a little snippet of me playing with my cousin's kid,
Oh,
who I play with all the time, who I've been trying to take her to the movies. I can't do it today. Tomorrow, her first movies ever. I was going to take her to Minecraft, but I was in the country. So she called me the other day. She's like, when are you going to take me to the movie? I'm like, Minecraft's not playing anymore. but I'll take it to Lilo and Stitch, which I kind of want to watch anyway.
It's
Uh,
good. It's good.
is it good? Yeah, Minecraft I had zero interest in. I was going to just probably sleep. But no, I'm excited. You know, it's like I didn't have that growing up. You know, like my parents were not,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't Americanized or whatever. You know, the movies.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with her. Like my cousin's young, but she's not. They're not going to the movies. It's not something you do. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, she's around all that, so I want her to get, you know, kind of all the things that make you, you know, make you like a, I won't say normal, but like feel like you fit in. You know, like her friends
Mm-hmm.
probably watch these movies, and she's like, oh, that's not something I get to do. So, you know,
Yeah, and that part of you probably doesn't fit that mold, but I feel like it gives, I don't know if you saw this, but I am lurking on Reddit, you know?
oh,
And
as a
when
person, I
people,
got rid of. By the way, I used to be. I'm like, I got to get rid of this because yeah, it just
yeah,
like it's
it can be
poison.
toxic.
It's poison when you're on the show, you know, like when you're on this thing, because
Hmm.
it's there's a lot of positive now, but there's a lot of negative. I'm like, it's not good. So I got rid of it. But anyway, you were
But a
saying,
friend of yours posted, like, hey, I
yeah,
feel like Imrul is misrepresented. Here are all these different things about him. And I
yeah,
felt like, wow,
yeah.
your friend is doing such a good job portraying you as a human rather
She
than
got
this
up.
huge network.
She's like,
And
she called me up. She's like, I did a thing. I'm like, what'd you do?
everyone saw it. That's like in Reddit. And how'd that feel?
Yeah, you know, I think that mixed with like I announced my school as well. I think that same
Hmm.
week, and it was a culmination of like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's not such a fucking monster, you know, and just like going out there and like luring women to his bedroom, like which wasn't happening, obviously, but
Hmm.
that's just the way people were seeing, you know. So it's you know, I have such a good strong base of friends here that
Hmm.
I love dearly, and sometimes they feel like they have to, you know, defend me. I didn't ask; they did it.
That's beautiful, though.
Her mother, who I'm, you know, like I'm very close. I'm close to the whole family. I'm actually I might go out there for the 4th of July. I was like, everyone's like, where you going? I'm like, they're like, are you going to have this? I'm like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. I mean, you know, I'll go back, but not doing 4th of July. Just such a zoo, and just I don't want any part of that. And they have like a country house in rural Pennsylvania where I can, you know, hang out with that family and
Hmm.
like do like waterboarding and just have a good time, just relax. So I might do that, but her mother is like always like checking up on me or on like, I want to see what the internet's saying about you. So she searches her chat GPT or whatever, like, what do we think of Emerald? And she's out there trying to defend me and do
That's
all
so
that. So
sweet.
it's nice. Yeah. Yeah. The mothers love me and the fathers, not so much, but
Let's just talk more about your school because I found that to be such, it really, when that got announced, like it
yeah.
really spoke to your character. And I know you talked a little bit about the inspiration, but for those who haven't, just talk more about it.
Yeah. You know, I am from one of the poorest, well, the part I'm from, and Bangladesh has come up a
Mm-hmm.
lot over the last 10, 15 years, but you know, still a very impoverished country. And I go back every year because my mother lives there. My father, you know, was there quite often. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd go back and plus, you know, over the last 10 years, I've been trying to get back my Bengali roots that I've
Mm-hmm.
won from for the longest time. So like trying to, you know, get the language again and just get the culture again. So, you know, I go back every year and then every year, you know, I'd see this abject poverty, you know, absolutely no safety net for anyone over there. So, and I give money away, this, that. And then it hit me that I want to do something that we can actually change people's lives. You know, obviously, people have done things with drinking water, with you know, trying to get some, you know, medical aid, and that's great. But I was thinking, okay, I want to do something where I can get my head around it. It doesn't have to be this massive project because I know myself, you know, like I might just
Mm-hmm.
like, I'll have this big idea, then it'll just stall for a long time because it feels too big, you know? But then the English school came along. I'm like, I can do this and I can do this. I can do this fairly quickly. And if we do it correctly, or if we just, I mean, not, and it's not that difficult of a process, but if we do it correctly, then we can actually change the trajectory of people's lives. And it seems like, okay, well, how do you do that with just English? And the reason, the inspiration behind all this was I've had virtual assistants for the longest time from real estate. You know, we outsource that stuff. That's a thing that
Mm-hmm.
happens here. You call tech support for a lot of things. It's in the Philippines or it's in India. Why is that? Well, it's because they know English, sometimes with an accent, but still they know English. It'll provide jobs for them over there. But in Bangladesh, there's no sense of uh, English being a skill set. I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
they don't see what I see. You know, it's like we have to really push this, because if you learn English at a young age, it's so much easier than doing it later on. It's kind of what they do. Like they wait till they get to high school or whatever, and that's when they'll learn it, because it's like it's going to be important for the next step. But at that point, it's a bit too late. It's way more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, how did I learn English? I learned English from watching movies, you know, and cartoons and whatever, you know, and well, and being here, but a lot from that. So it's like we can do that, you know, and just get them
Yeah.
multimedia, get them music, give them a structure a little bit, working on the curriculum. Like I've had I need to get someone over there to build a better curriculum, but the other stuff's already there, you know. So they're getting this basic structure right now, and then they're watching movies, and they're giving them little snacks, and that's what's happening. So, you know, anyway, let me back up just a bit. So that was the whole
Yeah.
idea. I'm like, okay, we do this. I want to do this in my dad's village,
Mm-hmm.
where I was born, on the kitchen floor, you know, and I try to go back every other year to this village, and it's so highly impoverished, and you just feel, and they're fine, living okay, but you know, they're also not living in the most. I think you just lose a sense of imagination over there, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that many
Yeah.
opportunities, you know? And I kind of want to give those kids that sense of imagination. I'm like, okay, they can do something more, you know, don't just have to be a trader or, you know, work in a farm or a fisherman, you know, or be the 0.00001% and excel in their school to be able to get into the better schools and the university and scholarships and all that, which is so difficult to get. And they just wind up being, you know, like I said, being farmers or fishermen, making $200 a month and living in poverty, right? Whereas if we, you know, teach them English, they get curious about the outside world, and you know, they can get a job through, you know, like being virtual assistant, or just be curious about and like communicating with people and doing different things. And that's a whole goal behind all this. And I think
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to reach we're not going to change everyone's life. That's never the goal. It's just a change. If we do it with one person, right, then our job has been done, right? We've
That.
changed the trajectory of one person's life. And I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. My friend was asking, like, what's your metric for all this? I'm like, there's no fucking metric, you know. It just
Mm-hmm.
give them this, let it sit, let it, you know, like if no one learns English, whatever, that's fine. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But I want them to have this as a tool, you know.
That's really
But I know it's
beautiful.
gonna work. I know it's gonna work, because again, the bar is on the floor right now, right? It just like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing there. So like now there's something there. So there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing there as far as I know in the village. I'm sure there's things in like the main cities, whatever. In the village, there really is nothing that's free. That's in
Mm-hmm.
different parts of the country where people can go to and learn English, you know, after school. So
I love it. How old
yeah.
are the kids? Like, what's the age range?
You know, it's I said under 10, but you know they're tiny in that part of the country, because they're just what's it people are just short over there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like hard to tell how old they are, but I told them like under 10, but I'm not super strict about that. The reason for
Yeah.
that is like I wanna really get in there when they're younger, just because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's your the way you speak is also going to help you get jobs in the future. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have a thick accent, yeah, you can learn English, and that's definitely great for them to know English anyway. But if you can learn English and like speak with less of an accent, it's going to get you a lot further. And you pick up like the sounds of your native tongue a bit
Mm-hmm.
more when you're like 10, 11, 12. Like my brother's, he doesn't really have an accent, but he's got a slight little thing. And he came here when he was 11, when I came here when I was 5, and I don't think I have an accent. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
No,
So
it's a
I,
privilege. My partner also immigrated when he was 5, and most people assume he's,
yeah,
American, born here. And his siblings, they were teenagers, so they just speak differently, but it's different compared to their, parents, who immigrated in their 40s and so on and older.
it's crazy though. It's like, I don't know how many times that people have told me like my English is so good. I'm like, yeah, because I'm from here. You know,
Yeah.
I grew up here as I was 5. It's like you have no accent. Like, why would I have an accent? You know, if I come here when I'm 4, like at that point, there's no reason for that to happen. But just like there's a little,
Mm-hmm.
like little subtle things that people say that it just, obviously racist.
It
That-
is,
yeah,
because I'm not from California, but I definitely sound like I live in the valley.
yeah. All right. And it's like obviously the common one is like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from New York. So, where are you really from? It's like, well, no,
Mm,
I mean, I am from Bangladesh, but that happens to a lot of people. They could be like third generation Asian American, and they're like, it's like, where are you really, really, really from? It's like, yeah, I guess my
mm-hmm.
great great grandfather came from Vietnam or something, but you don't ask that from a white person, right? You don't say, okay, I guess I'm Irish American from like three
Yeah,
generations. You just don't think about that. I don't know why you have to categorize people that way, but we just do as human beings. And it's kind of disgusting, but that's the world we live in,
sadly.
sadly.
So the school, it's not open yet, or is it open?
It's open. It's open.
It's
One's already
open.
open. Yeah, the second one, the first one is in my dad's village. The second one is
Mm-hmm.
my mother's village. The whole goal is to open it as many different outputs as possible. It's fairly easy to do. It doesn't cost. Once the setup is done, to run it fairly low cost. I was doing it all on my own. I haven't used any of that GoFundMe money just yet. It's sitting there. So that's going to go more into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they keep, because I don't have my bank account set up with that. So they keep saying, take it out. But we're leaving that in there for now. And that's just going to help expand it more and more. And the big
Mm-hmm.
reason for the GoFundMe was to put it out there, let people know what I'm doing, because I need some help. Right. And people have reached out to me because I don't know what I'm doing. Like I have an idea, but I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
English teacher. I don't, I haven't worked for UNICEF. I don't know how to set up all this things over here. I just know I have a vision. I want to teach your kids, learn English, and the story, right? And then people are like, oh, we need this and this. I can help you with this, with outreach. And, I built curriculums for a bunch of different countries, and people have shared so much of their knowledge with me
Mm-hmm.
through this. And I've been immensely grateful for that. And again, I think it was also my biggest goal going into the show too, because I don't know what I was doing with any of this stuff. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like fun, but if nothing else, it'll motivate me and give me a platform to push what I think is my life's mission. You know, yeah, like I'm in the industry in real estate, which is very lucrative, but so
Mm-hmm.
hollow, and as much as it's fun to make money, after a while, you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I supposed to do? And I am, even though I've had a very interesting, difficult life at times, I'm super privileged,
Mm-hmm.
super privileged. So it's like, I have to use that for something, because I know it's going to eat me up inside, So this is the beginning of that. I know I want to do something with women in Bangladesh. They don't have as much resources. So, like I'm trying to expand, I'm trying to open up a clothing line, hopefully,
Oh.
like pants. So it's like, I think I'm good at it. So when I say I make pants, I mean, I design pants and I'm over there because
Mm-hmm.
I go to Bangladesh every year and there's nothing to do except for eat and hang out with family, which is fun. But you get bored after, a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only, during the day, we're not doing anything. So I've been making, clothes for a while. I could just take different design, like do this, and then do it. So I want to go into that, and we're trying to find women tailors because it's not really a thing over there. It's more like it's a very male dominant field, and have them be partners in this and expand out that. That's like my next thing I want to do. So it's like find ways to
Wow, I got chills when you said like this is kind of my purpose, because I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, going on a reality show is one thing, but to have like such bigger intentions and be living in your truth, like that's wonderful.
Thank you. And it's not like this thing that's like I'm not some. It's not motivating me every single day. That's not what something it is in a way, but it's also like I just know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. However long
Mm-hmm.
it takes me to get to that, but I know that's where I want to get to. That's my goal right now. Someone was asking me, when I feel like I made it, as
Mm-hmm.
an immigrant. It's like, what's your moment where you feel like you've made it in America? And I forget what answer I gave, but then I thought about it. I'm like, I feel like it changes. You know,
Oh,
I feel like it changes because your goals change. The sense of making it and feeling successful changes with time, right? Which is how we
yeah.
are. I can have a little story about it. Like I grew up in a household, and I think some people can relate to this. I don't know. It definitely happened to me. Whereas we never had batteries. We just never had batteries in the
Never.
house. So every time like the battery in the remote control would run out, I would just flip them around, and it would give it enough juice to be good for the next, day or whatever. We just keep doing that. It would work. And then eventually you'd have to buy batteries. So like when I first got like my first job, whatever, I bought like 1,000 batteries, and I'm like, I'm never gonna have batteries. I think I still have them. Um, that was like a sense of making it, and then eventually, okay, now I have a car. I couldn't drive for the longest time. That's a sense of making it. And then the next step is like, okay, I'm doing well in my career, making it, okay. And then eventually I'm able to take care of my mother, right? Sense of making it. And now those are all goals. And now it's like, I've got that. What's the next, what's my ultimate goal? And I think it comes to this, it comes to this, and hopefully I'm able to use all that energy into something that's really gonna grow and change people's lives. It's changed my life, right? I think just like being and talking about it and doing it. And
I really appreciate this higher purpose for you, because everyone comes on to a reality show with something, I listened to a podcast that it's a Bravo podcast that, from a legal point of view, it's two lawyers breaking down different lawsuits, but also contracts. And those contracts you guys sign are airtight. So you have to want to get something out of it. And most people are selling us something. That's just the reality. Like, especially Summer House, it's a big advertisement for Loverboy.
Yeah.
And but I think it hits differently. Like, your purpose isn't this capitalist endeavor.
Yeah. No, Jesse and I were talking about this when we went on like Watch What Happens Live, and he's like, dude, I wanted to do this shit, like, I mean, it kind of happened to him like that. I don't know what his whole process was. I think they also cast him, but he had like a vision for this, and it worked out. It's a platform if you use it correctly. But I think one of the reasons it didn't work out for me is because I really didn't have that. If it worked out, great, but it wasn't. You got to really, really want to do these things and have that like end goal with like, okay, where do I want to take this for it to all make sense, And I didn't really have that with that, where it's like, cool, I'll have a place to like, party and hang out and do whatever, and also like talk about things that really, affect me and motivated me to like do those things as well.
Yeah. Well, since you're not in the Hamptons this summer, what are you looking forward to?
I got a busy summer, like I said, I'm launching this building. I'm getting into, I've lost my sense of creativity doing like just selling and renting apartments like I have. It just like, it's just numbers and marketing. And I haven't really been able to be creative, and that's where the making pants comes in. And then I started just doing Airbnbs and like furnishing apartments as well. And like, I kind of like designing apartments, like I kind of like that entire design part of it. And it kind of merges what things I kind of like to do. So I am doing a lot of that. It's frustrating, but it's super fun and it's coming together. So that's the next few weeks, launching this building. So super busy with that. I got a few trips planned. I'm trying to buy a lake house.
Oh,
I love the idea of like, being able to go out every morning and kayak as part of my morning, routine. So like, and they're not like super expensive, and a huge sense of making it for immigrants, especially my parents, is always owning something. And they're like, you don't know. I mean, I have a partnership with like a few people. That's not really my place. I don't own my place in Manhattan. I have a bunch of different Airbnbs. I don't own any of them. My mom said, yeah, why don't you buy something? I'm like, I think the idea of like buying something in New York is so difficult, because it's the places I want to live in, honestly, or they're going to cost like $3 million for like a one bedroom or whatever, 1 bedroom condo. And like, that's not a great investment. So it's like, yeah, I'll pay some stupid rent, whatever. And then I'll make my first home my vacation home. There's been a big shift in that for people in the generation. It's like, okay, your second home is your first home, and you rent that out. So that's what I got into. That's what I'm getting into. And I want to try to close on that hopefully this summer, and like have that like upstate up in, I don't know if you know New York, but like up the Hudson is beautiful, and the Catskills, and kind of try to go more into that and have that there. I mean, I'll still have some time in the Hamptons for sure. You want to mix it in a bit.
Maybe not in the house though.
I don't know. I mean, it's not like Carl was asking me about this when we were hanging out, and he was like, dude, I want you to come out one of the weekends. I was like, we're friends, I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, we'll see how it works out. And when we left for the producers, when I was with the producers, when they said, I'm like, hey, we're not having you back on, I'm like, cool. And I made plans anyway. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, well, it doesn't mean that we're not closing the door. They don't want to, and it's also like a very producer talk anyway to say that, like, we're not closing the door. I don't know if they meant it or not, but I can see a world where I go back for a weekend. The
Mm-hmm.
weekend they cut me out was my favorite weekend, honestly, because I was like, I went in, I cleared the air with like, hey guys, I'm sorry. I felt like I was having a good time, but I wasn't being mindful about what else is going on in the house. And you can do both things, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
one or the other. And I think I chose the first part a little bit too much, and I could be a better
Mm-hmm.
person, right? And I cleared the air, and they were like, cool, you know. And then that dinner is when I talked about the school and what else I'm doing, and then the next that Saturday I went, because I didn't really go out like that. And then the Saturday I went and went to the gym, got a workout in, got a little sauna session in, came back, bought bagels for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was on my motorcycle, so I had to carry them under my sweater. So like I was pregnant. Um, but I kept them warm. And then I did that. We had nice little conversations, and then I rode off into the wind at like 1 o'clock on a Saturday, thinking, that was good. I like that. That was a good day. And then that obviously cut me out of that weekend, so that's fun.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
like things like that, that's I could do something like that. I think where it's like, okay, it was a one off. Um, so who knows? I'm also not closing my door on that. I guess maybe
Okay.
just
Good to know.
I
Good
think
to
part of
know.
it is like, I think part of it is also my ego. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
toxic part of us. It's like, even though even though they were kind of shitty to you, and maybe, I was to them, who knows, right? There's some parts of you, it's like, I want to prove something, like
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you want to quiet that, and sometimes you lean into that. And the issue with me, and I talk about this a lot, is like, I have too much fuck it energy. It's like, yeah, I really shouldn't. But fuck it. The reason I'm on the show, right? So it's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't, but it's not going to be the best if I go back for a weekend or something. But fuck it. I can totally see that happening.
Well, who knows what will happen on this new
Yeah.
season, too,
Yeah.
because Paige is gone. That's like a huge, change
Yeah.
for the show. So
Sure.
who knows what could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, though, I do want to talk about your dad a little bit, just because obviously it wasn't covered on the show, but you shared a lot on like social media, just like your
Yeah.
grief, your journey back home. I just want to ask like how you're doing. Like, is there anything you want to share about your dad?
My dad was a lot of things. But what he taught me is just, resiliency and through adversity. Yeah. And be courageous, and grow a mustache. So, I always made fun of him about it. And now I actually like how it looks. And,
Mm,
it's an homage to him, but it's also like kind of like how it looks. And there's a lot of qualities in my dad I didn't like. He wasn't always as generous as I wanted him to be, and he was kind of short-sighted in a lot of ways. But that's also the perspective, or that's also a result of his upbringing, right? Which I don't know
mm-hmm,
about. I only know about what I went through, right? And what I do know is that he was courageous enough to be able to bring me here and give me you've always wanted to give me a better life, right? And I
mm-hmm.
have that, and that's because of him, and he's he didn't always say it, but he wanted the best for his sons and his family, and that's the message I want. I want to be able to, and he didn't always help people as much as I want to for who he was. Like his sister, my aunt, doesn't have running water. She's in the village. I mean, she doesn't have running water in the house. Like there's like a well,
Mm-hmm.
and that seems so crazy to me. I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. And while he takes care of her medical bills, make sure she's alive, I think that's the bar for him. So he's like, okay, I want to make sure she's fine, but everything else you don't really need in his head, So it's like he always had that sense of responsibility, that like immense responsibility that you have, or that innate responsibility that you have for people around you. He gave that to me, and then I was able to take that and run with it. And it's like, well, I want to go a little further than that, right? So I think that all comes from him.
Yeah.
It's just a different iteration of that. And I was always like, why can't you be, this and that? But I'm like, I think he was able to give that energy to me, to push me to be a better person. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like we take what the good parts of our
Yeah.
parents leave the rest and try to be even better is like the goal, right? And then, if there are generations after us, hopefully they leave the shitty parts of us.
Yeah. The other thing is like, I was just blown away how many people he touched, and
Mm,
respected him. There's not one person who said, anything negative about him except, like me, I guess. But that's what you do within your family. But that was really, really, really something that blew me away, and how much he had community around him. And they, like, when I found out, it was also, it was such a shock. And then I'm like, I had to make the decision of bringing him back, which isn't something you do in Muslim culture, whereas like you want to bury the body where it died. It causes less stress to the body essentially, and they feel all that even in afterlife. So it's like, you want to do that. I'm like, I have to do, I can't keep, I had to bring him back. So, and that's a logistical nightmare to be able to bring somebody 20 hours away in a flight, take a dead body 20 hours away, go through immigration, go through all the logistical nightmare that happens with that while you're grieving is just the worst thing ever.
yeah.
But his friends and his community rallied around and like took care of all of that. And I didn't have to do anything, I just had to I had to take the flight over and do all that. But that was just truly touching to know that he had that, and that made me, makes you super proud to know that people loved, people love the people you love. Yeah.
No, it is. And grief is, my brother died when I was 17, and I feel like when I talk about grief, it's the worst you'll ever feel and the best you'll ever feel too, because you see love even in the darkest of moment. It's more, I think, vibrant even.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think the way I grieve is I still, when I was over in Bangladesh, it was really good. It was really good for me to be over there, to be around all that. We have a huge family, I mean, you talk and you laugh and you do all these things, and you still talk shit, and I think a part of it is like, sometimes we just, we idolize the dead a bit too much, in the sense that it's like, when you do that, and it's great, I get that. Yeah, you want to accentuate all the positives, but when you do it a little too much and don't talk about everything else, at that point, that person is gone, because it feels ethereal at that point, right? Where it's like, if you talk about them like the way you would talk about them if they're still alive, they're still with you, and
yes.
I think I capture that, and I do that, and sometimes a bit frustrating, I'm sure, but it's like, I don't think I'm going to lose that sense of it. That's my grieving process. They're still here, I still feel all the things I felt. It's a complicated relationship, but you take the best of it, you use, and hopefully, and I think it is, or already has been, we named the school after him. And, it's going to be just, he gave me a better life, and I want to give that to other people, to as many people as possible. And that's going to be his legacy, and hopefully, hopefully that motivates me even more.
Well, I feel like that's the best note to end on. That was so beautiful. So thank you so much, Imrul. This was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you just showing up as just like, it feels like you are who you are and you feel comfortable in that. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, appreciate you having me on. Good chatting.